Good evening and welcome to News Review. The Chief Minister this week told the Foreign Affairs Committee that, judging by the facts, the UK had not done enough to deter Spain from bullying and harassing Gibraltar. He said the long border queues are still there today and Spanish vessels continue to take executive actions in Gibraltar waters, and expressed the view that the UK should therefore distance itself from comments made by Spanish politicians saying Anglo-Spanish relations are excellent.
The FAC is a committee formed by the House of Commons to examine and advise on UK foreign policy. The Chief Minister warmly welcomed them on behalf of everyone on the Rock and praised the work of the committee, particularly for three important reports in 1999, 2002 and 2008. For its part, committee chairman Sir Richard Ottaway said they were friends and supporters of Gibraltar. Then it was down to business. Over an hour and a half, Mr. Picardo hugely impressed the committee, as the chairman would then go on to confirm to GBC. He told them the relationship between Gibraltar and Britain has always been strong, even though their governments may be warmer and colder towards each other throughout the years. He said the relationship was the best it's been for years, and vexed only by the online gaming point of consumption tax proposals.
But we found there that the Foreign Office has been very helpful indeed, and that our problems have not been with them, or even with Her Majesty's Treasury, who is levying a tax, but with the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, something that we can look at in more detail.
The Chief Minister said the UK leaving the European Union would be a disaster for Gibraltar, and didn't even want to consider that scenario. He was encouraged by the fact that the leaders of all three major parties in the UK Parliament were likely to campaign for remaining with the Union, and argued that Gibraltar would in future want more Europe than the UK, not less. The core of questioning focused on relations with Spain and an analysis of the UK's defence of Gibraltar. Mr. Picardo said Spanish politicians had been quoted repeatedly saying Anglo-Spanish relations were excellent despite Gibraltar. He said this couldn't possibly be the case when Spain was punishing 30,000 British citizens daily, and the UK should therefore distance itself from these claims. Mr. Picardo said a possible resolution to the fishing dispute wouldn't stop the regular incursions by Spanish state vessels.
What we're seeing is an increase in incursions exclusively by state actors doing things totally unrelated to fishing. For example, interfering with executive action being taken by the Gibraltar authorities, interfering with lawful bunkering activities in our waters, filming those who are bunkering in our waters in an attempt to intimidate them. So, although I would very much wish that we could get rid of the problem of incursions simply by resolving the fishing issues that we have with 60 fishermen in Spain, I don't think that we will.
A few eyebrows were raised around the room when committee member Sir John Stanley said the Foreign Office often takes several days to register a complaint to Madrid, and sometimes even waits until several can be bundled together to send in one diplomatic bag. He asked Mr. Picardo whether he thought Madrid got the impression the FCO was just going through the motions. Mr. Picardo said he was conscious that the Foreign Office had developed a strategy to ensure every complaint was registered, and that this was only right. However, during a separate line of questioning, he said things were obviously not getting any better, and therefore the results showed the UK obviously hadn't done enough to deter Spain.
If we look at what the United Kingdom has said, well, what the United Kingdom has said has been very robust. It's been more robust, perhaps, than it has been for 30 years. But if we look at the results of what has been said and what has been done, then the results are not so good. And, people in Gibraltar, this is a small geography, see incursions themselves, suffer frontier queues, either themselves or through their family members or their work colleagues, are constantly in the knowledge of what the frontier queue may be. We've seen the European Commission fail Gibraltar miserably when it's come to its inspection of the frontier between Gibraltar and Spain. Since then, we've seen a new phenomenon, which is the pedestrian queue, that can sometimes put old, young, and working people through having to queue in inclement weather, in hot weather, in cold weather, in rain, for up to 90 minutes, whilst a Spanish crack anti-terrorist Guardia Civil force intimidates them on the other side of the frontier as they go through. That is still happening. If it is still happening, not enough has been done.
He said it was time for British diplomacy to say enough.
What if these incursions were happening off Cornwall? What if the Blackberries of the Guardia Civil were on the other side of the Eurotunnel, and British citizens going to Paris were made to queue for an hour and a half after they got off the train? And why doesn't British diplomacy say enough? Why? I mean, I am yet to be persuaded by anyone of a good reason that affects Western democracies generally that we shouldn't be making the position very clear to Spain.
The Chief Minister said Gibraltar would welcome an increased Royal Navy presence in British waters and agreed it was time for the UK to modernise its relationship with all overseas territories so they would all enjoy representation in the Houses of Parliament. In answers to questions from Andrew Rosendale, Mr Picardo said he had no doubts that the Queen would receive a huge welcome if she were to visit the Rock, a comment which received warm applause from the public gallery at the Garrison Library. Finally, Mr Picardo invited the committee to publish a report on the findings made during their visit. The chairman quoted the Foreign Secretary's assurance that the UK would do everything to safeguard Gibraltar and said the committee would ensure that happens.
And the FAC confirmed that it won't be publishing a report on this week's findings. In an exclusive interview with GBC, Sir Richard Ottaway confirmed, however, that the committee will use the findings in meetings with ministers and will be writing a letter to the Foreign Secretary with recommendations, which will then be placed on the public record. He spoke to Jonathan Sacramento.
Well, in truth, we don't actually need a report to make recommendations here. A report is something to the House and it tends to be on a very broad subject, taking evidence from all over the world, number of witnesses coming in. And this is quite a narrow issue. It's a very important issue. It's quite deep, but it is quite narrow, and it may not need a full-blown report to do it. I think we could have discussions, get the Minister in, and possibly do a letter to the Foreign Secretary, which we would publish, of course, be in the public domain, setting out our views.
A rebranding and restructure of the Finance Centre was announced this week at a reception to welcome the new CEO of the Financial Services Commission, Samantha Barras. Minister for Financial Services, Albert Isler, told members of the sector that the new legislation would be rolled out over the coming months and working in partnership with the industry and 4 new senior executives. And in her first interview, Ms Barras said Gibraltar, as a jurisdiction, was well placed to meet the challenge of losing 2 retail banks in a short space of time.
Well, we've done an awful lot of work these past months, as I said this evening, to work in tandem with the Finance Centre Council. This is the real partnership that we're trying to evolve with them. And that spans through rebranding of the product, of what we believe we have to sell, the message we want to give, the people that are giving it. We now have 4 senior executives. The countries that we want to spend our time marketing in, we've given a whole list of all the events for the whole year, so that the partners in the Finance Centre can come and join us and do it with us. And the legislation we're going to be rolling out over the next 2 or 3 months, the bits that we've already done, the launch of the insurance-linked securities, the QNOPs following off from the QROP success. There's an awful lot going on, and with the arrival of Samantha Barras as our new CEO of the Financial Services Commission, I thought it was an ideal opportunity to introduce her to the sector and to then talk them through all the things that we've been doing and where we want to be going in the forthcoming 12 months.
My vision for the Financial Services Commission is for it to support the growth and development of Gibraltar and the financial services sector in Gibraltar by offering safe, proportionate, good regulation, and to do so in a way where the staff who are leading and running that regulation are very confident and have the skills and understanding of the financial services sector and are able to bring to bear a good, proportionate, risk-based approach to the way that they regulate that. And I think the really exciting challenge for Gibraltar is the new growth opportunities in pensions and insurance and funds. These are developing markets for Gibraltar, and they represent exciting challenges for the Commission in order, for us to keep up to speed with what the regulatory challenges in those are.
And you come here, of course, at a time where Gibraltar is perhaps, it's been sheltered in the past from the global economic climate, but it's starting to feel the pinch now with certain banks leaving Gibraltar. So is this one of the challenges that you're referring to, and how do you see Gibraltar looking forward as a jurisdiction?
Yeah, I think a challenge, one of the very basic challenges that a regulator in any jurisdiction, and Gibraltar is, this is very much the case for Gibraltar, is the protection of the consumers within the jurisdiction, and do Gibraltarians have access to good, safe banking services and adequate banking services in Gibraltar, and that's clearly been a challenge with some of the recent announcements, but it's a challenge that it's quite clear from the collaborative working that we've been doing with the government. It's one that I'm very confident Gibraltar is going to be able to meet.
This week, the Commissioner of Police announced a restructure of the senior ranks of the Royal Gibraltar Police. This includes the reintroduction of the rank of Chief Superintendent and will result in a senior management team led by the Commissioner and consisting of the Chief Superintendent and 3 superintendents.
The rank of Chief Superintendent will be filled on an acting basis till October, with Superintendent Richard Massoud and Superintendent Ian McGrail taking it in turns. Each superintendent will head a division. Richard Alger, who's recently been promoted, will head operations. And Chief Inspector Cathal Yates has now been promoted to head crime and protective services. The third will lead the headquarters division. A Chief Inspector post has been abolished, and the civil service contingent will take on additional administrative responsibilities, allowing senior police officers to focus on operational police matters. The Chief Superintendent will deputise for the Commissioner and have responsibility for discipline, policy formation and management, as well as other aspects of internal service delivery.
The government opened an investigation this week into allegations of bullying made against ETB staff member Joana Hernandez. In a statement, it said that as a consequence of the allegations made both in writing and verbally by a group of graduate trainees, the government has formally followed the Dignity at Work policy and procedure issued in December last year. The government statement didn't name the person against whom the allegations have been made, but said that seeing as she's a civil servant, the Chief Minister referred the matter to the Chief Secretary Ernest Gomez. His office will now be taking charge of the investigation. Full details of the allegations were taken in writing from the complainant and their representative. The person against whom the allegations have been made is being informed of these in detail and will then be invited to comment. All parties will then be informed in writing of the outcome of the investigation. Meanwhile, the opposition, which called for an independent inquiry into a case of alleged bullying, says an internal disciplinary investigation is not enough. Christine Vasquez spoke to opposition leader Daniel Feetham.
Well, we would have gone further. We would have instituted an independent investigation, possibly run and conducted by somebody from the outside, because these are very serious allegations. I mean, you're talking about very young, vulnerable trainees that are making allegations of very serious abuse by way of bullying against the manageress of the scheme, the person that ran the scheme, Joana Hernandez. At the time that we called for an independent investigation, we did so because it appeared to have been dealt with at ministerial level by the Chief Minister. I mean, he took the decision last week to merely just shunt Mrs. Hernandez to one side, away from the Future Job Strategy scheme, and we felt that was totally inappropriate. I mean, there shouldn't really be any political involvement in what happens to Ms. Joana Hernandez. The decision really should be taken internally by the civil service, and we were calling for an independent investigation. Look, we're prepared to support this investigation by the Chief Secretary, provided that it's conducted in an open and transparent way, and that the findings are then laid before Parliament so that everybody can scrutinise the way that the investigation has been conducted and also the findings of the investigation.